Steph?
No.
No. Okay, so no public comments. Now we were to have a delegation. Unfortunately, Daron was not able to make it today due to illness. So we'll hopefully invite him back next time. So we'll move on to number 5, which is election of chair and vice chair. I can't forget how we do this stuff.
So you can nominate somebody, or someone can nominate themselves.
Do we, and just a question too, I can't remember, I haven't looked lately. Are we still advertising for members of this committee? Like, are we hoping to get additional members? Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry, I can't hear you, Steph. I don't know what's going on with your audio. I don't know if it's me or. You were fine up until a moment ago. Okay. Oh, so Steph's writing in the chat. So the ads went out in December. We haven't received, well, I guess you can't comment on what we've received. Nobody's been appointed, I guess is what we can say. So, okay, well, hopefully we'll get some new members. So does anybody else feel willing and ready to take on the position of chair of this committee?
I don't know.
No. Thanks, Fritz, for your honesty.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I don't even know if the councillors are eligible to chair, but you've got enough on your plate. You don't need to chair this committee. And that only leaves Ron. Do you feel like stepping up to be the chair or the vice chair, perhaps?
Robyn, I think you've been a wonderful chair. You really run meetings very well, and I sure hope you will continue.
Okay, well, I will reluctantly accept by, I think just by, what do you say, just by default, if everybody's happy to have me continue as chair. And I think last time we kind of went without a vice chair, because really the vice chair is there in case I can't make it once, they can run the meeting or anything, but we have so few members, I feel like that's, you know, if I can't make a meeting, we just reschedule, I think usually, if I can't remember if that's ever happened, but or should we try for a vice chair? Yeah, Steph, yeah.
It's nice to have a vice chair if Ron wants to do that.
Sound good stuff.
Yeah, so your audio is really, yeah, it's not good. But you basically what I'm hearing is yes, we should elect a vice chair. So between Fritz and Ron, basically, which again, I don't think there's a lot. It's kind of just a title. Maybe Steph, you could say, oh, when doing consultations, it's included on lists and everything. So I don't think it's really much of a role. If for some reason something came up that I wasn't able to make a meeting, you would chair the meeting. But otherwise, there's really not much to it.
I nominate.
That's okay with me. It's fine.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Fritz. You can be the vice chair. Okay, excellent.
Keep an eye on you, Robyn.
Yes, keep me in line. Okay. All right. So do we have to actually vote, or is that just kind of all decided? Okay. So do we vote? Can we just do one vote of me as chair and Fritz as vice chair? Is everybody in agreement? Yes. No, nobody. Okay. So unanimous. It's passed. Thanks, Steph. Okay, so number 6, business arising from the minutes. Oh yeah, so this was looking at our work plan, which we sorted out by the end of last year. Oh, it's linked. Sorry, didn't notice that it wasn't in the agenda. Let me open that up. Okay, so we have our work plan, and the idea is that we would spend a bit of time sort of maybe figuring out what it is we want to tackle, maybe how we want to tackle it. Is it committees? Is it sort of like last year where we had some working sessions in our meetings, which I think worked well for a few sessions, and then we started having the delegations, so it sort of cut into our time. So I think it could be useful maybe for some of these to have the same kind of working sessions, and we'll just have to maybe alternate, you know, having a delegation and having a working session or something like that, give it our limited time. Okay, so we've got our number 1 is housing targets, and Ron's actually already working on that, which is great. So we've kind of got a subcommittee going, and we'll have a report from him after this. So I feel like that's on its way, and we'll continue that work as this little subcommittee, I think, being led by Ron. So encouraging more secondary suites, number 2 on our work plan, encouraging more secondary suites. Research, okay, chair to review. Needed.
There was a question, Robyn, there were a couple of questions brought up at council regarding our work plan. And just there was a request for clarification of why this indicated staff. And I would suggest that we take that out, like the red staff, because it red flagged it for some council members, which is what makes this different than some of the other items. The other question that arose in part because of this was a question about what has the impact been thus far of allowing detached secondary suites, and we didn't get council didn't get a clear answer on that. So if staff is working on pulling together sort of commentary on secondary suites, that's a core piece of information that we don't have. There was sort of some discussion about, well, some secondary suites are being built and families are moving into them and then renting out the main house, but that's really not relevant. What's relevant is how many people got their building permits, built their detached secondary suites, regardless of the use that they were being put to. So we need to keep an eye on that.
And sorry, Maureen, that was specifically detached secondary suites?
It was specifically detached secondary suites, but I think just an update on the numbers for both gives us a foundation, because that as is, there's a lot of speculation about massive uptake and negligible uptake, and I don't know.
Okay.
So Daniel, it was just getting clarification around the number of secondary suites that actually have been built, in particular since the introduction of the detached secondary suite bylaw. I think Sue Ellen brought that up. Morning,
Okay,
Dan.
and hi Danielle, welcome. Anything else, Maureen?
I'll bring it up when we get to the point in the plan.
Okay. Okay, so looking at number 2, encourage more secondary suites. Yeah, I feel like this one we were sort of wondering, because we've done quite a bit. Like we made recommendations on changes to the secondary suite bylaw. Yeah, I think it was, I mean, and I don't want to put you on the spot, Daniel, but I feel like, I know we put that word staff there because it was, I feel like my memory of that was, because I feel like it's sort of already on the table and it's kind of with staff at the moment. I don't know that there's much, I guess it's, the question is what more can this committee do to contribute to that?
I'll say, Robyn, I have a report going to the next council meeting that's about detached secondary suite sizes. And essentially it outlines, it's some work Natasha did just looking at like what would the effect of reducing the size be? How many lots, you know, would that be talking about? And then it's just seeking referral to this committee and to the APC for that initial comment. So come back.
Okay.
So
great. So we can look at that for next meeting. That sounds good.
And Robyn?
Yes, Fritz, yeah.
Yeah, I also thought that some of these items, like if you take, item 2 or 4 or 5, a lot of them it's hard to really separate them. Like give an example, if you go through the land use bylaw, it's obvious that you just pick up things, right? So it's like, there actually may be some things that are become evident that can be changed in the zoning bylaw, but I would say that I'm interested in doing some of these things, right? But I think it automatically kind of gets addressed
in a land use bylaw review. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm a bit puzzled about the like kind of the reasons why people build, and how you facilitate that. This far, obviously building a secondary suite in a new home is economical, right? But it's economical if it kind of sits under the house, but it's less economical if it's attached on the side or so. So how do you kind of, but then, but we noticed that a lot of people like to have some separation, because it's more likely that they let their kids use it and they feel comfortable, or their parents, or the other way around, So it's more like going through a bit like, do the two do the two formulas, attached or detached, do they actually respond to what people are looking for? You know, because if you put something, a lot of people like to keep the gardens, for instance, or they don't want to cut the trees, or it goes on and on, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Just trying to see how we can, I mean, that's good feedback. And I can see how the item 2, encouraging more secondary suites, item 4, cluster and duplex zoning, and then 5, land use bylaw, they're all kind of, you know, interconnected. Yeah. So
The same as 7, actually.
And then, well, yeah, and 7, I think that might be, I think that's a little more high level as opposed to these other ones that are a little more specific, like, you know, actual thing, you know, encouraging more secondary suites, like changing the land, you know, their maximum size or minimum size. Cluster and duplex zoning is a very tangible thing. Changes land use bylaw is very specific. I feel like the number 7 is more high level, like identify challenges and opportunities for, you know, multifamily. And then well, we have the request for proposal, but that's we'll see if what comes of that. That's in council's hands right now. So yeah, okay. So do we feel like maybe is that like a workshop session then as a committee? So maybe looking at cluster and duplex zoning, how we can encourage more secondary suites and land use bylaw changes, and kind of consider those all together and see if we make any progress.
Yeah, I think
on
so.
any of them, and then take it from there.
Makes sense to me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So why don't we put that somewhere that will be a working session? Yeah, Steph?
Sorry, Michael's trying to speak.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, Robyn, I favor that approach because looking at it more holistically and less silo orientated might be helpful. That would be interesting to see where that goes. I was kind of looking to see whether Fritz would actually give it the nod because frankly, because of a greater awareness on specifics, but it seems a logical way to go, and because otherwise we're compartmentalizing this so much, and it's difficult when there's so much connectivity between the issues.
Yeah. Okay. Great. All right. So let's try and fit that into one of our upcoming meetings. I feel like that requires, you know, a good session, like it needs a good at least hour, I'd say, of working time. So it probably wouldn't work at a meeting where we have either a delegation or possibly a referral, unless they're very brief. So yeah, let's look at maybe, because I think if we have, sounds like Daniel, maybe we'll have a referral next meeting potentially. Yeah. So maybe we ask, so maybe we see if Daron can come back next meeting, and then we'll have the referral, and that'll take up probably the meeting, and then maybe the following one. So that's February. So maybe in March, we can plan to do this working session on those items. Okay, so if that sounds good, we'll pencil that in. And then Housing Reserve Fund. I think that we thought that was pretty, that should be like a subcommittee or something, and working with the CFO, and there's probably, because I think, sorry, it's on our agenda today. Okay, so let's leave that, because I think we're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay. And number 4 we've addressed, number 5 we've addressed. So the next ones I think are sort of higher level and less tangible. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. So the number 6, alternative modes of land tenure. Number 7, sort of encouraging those attached to multifamily. Number 8, proactive rezonings. Number 9, policy development. And then the speaker series, which actually that's something we could think about after we've sort of finished up the talking to developers, or start mixing it in, but talking to developers. Okay, so if we go back to number 6, alternative modes of land tenure, I feel like, and maybe again, we could sort of bunch some of these together, because like I say, they're all kind of higher level conceptual ones. So alternative modes of land tenure, and I'm not sure what, but I know sort of number 7 and 8 kind of seem connected to me. Like it's sort of about, I think, maybe looking at Bowen Island as a whole and seeing where there's opportunities. Yeah, well, and we put that in for late 2022 for the proactive rezoning. So maybe we aim for that in the second half of the year, because maybe by then, that might be good, actually. Maybe we aim for that in the second half of the year. Because by then we might know more about that expression of interest on lot 1, what's going on, you know, in 6 months or so, we might know something more about what's happening there. So does that sound good to everybody? We can put that on the schedule for the second half of the year to look at 7 and 8 as a bit of a working session. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Late. Okay. Second half of year. Okay. And then, oh yeah. Subcommittee. Okay. Alternative modes of land tenure. I wonder if that's, maybe that we could link that in, because I know we've been talking about it for a while now, to have a speaker. And this might be great since we're all on Zoom and everything. That'll be a lot easier to have a speaker. Maybe this is when we reach out and try to get somebody to talk to us about community land trusts, and that might sort of tie into these alternative modes of land tenure. And if there's other modes, and maybe even co-ops or something like that, like maybe we can just see if we can get a few different speakers to come and talk. Or maybe there's one person who can speak to us about sort of different things. But yeah, maybe we do that. So so if we've sort of got February and March are kind of booked up, so maybe, yeah, late spring or into summer, so April, May, June kind of timing. We can look for a speaker. Michael, did you have a, yeah?
Yeah, Robyn, but I think it's great. If we're going to have that discussion on community land trusts, if there is a reasonably brief paper or executive overview on community lands trusts, so we can have a bit better background understanding. I myself have got to tell you, I have little or no knowledge of community land trusts. So if there's a backgrounder that, you know, is not 100 pages, just to give an overview, that would be helpful. So we kind of increase the level of background background understanding prior to the discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure there's, yeah.
I confess, my understanding is on this particular subject is really, really limited.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And I think that's why we'd have somebody come and do a presentation. And I'm sure that there's resources out there, websites or something out there that we can point the committee to if they're unfamiliar with it and prepare for that. Yeah, good. Okay, so we'll aim for that in sort of April, May, June. So maybe Steph, you and I can work together, if anybody else, to look for speakers. And if anybody else has ideas, I'll sort of reach out to our sort of, and, you know, I've met lots of people through the housing conferences and stuff like that. So I'm sure I can dig back through the Rolodex and see who I can find and reach out to and figure that out. Okay. Yeah,
Robyn,
Maureen.
I would be interested in hearing from a municipality that has worked with a community land trust, not just from the organization itself. And I don't know if there are any projects, and haven't been able to find just with an initial scan, if there are any projects in Gibson's or Seashell or, you know, sort of Squamish that might be able to tell us, you know, what their experience is.
Yeah, okay, so let's try to find it. The only one I know of in the Lower Mainland, I believe, is Vancouver. And I'm not sure if they've actually, I know they were working with the Community Lands Trust. I'm not sure what developments have happened in the last couple of years. Yeah, so let's see if we can find out if any of those municipalities, I think that's a really good point. Yeah.
I've got a nice email list from my last course I did.
Oh, great. Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we can reach out to some folks. Okay, great. So that'll start the conversation on alternative modes of land tenure. Like I say, for 7 and 8, we'll have a bit of a working session later in the year. And then number 9, policy development. I think we sort of put this at the end because it was sort of the least lowest priority, I guess, or yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Let's talk about it and see where we think as a committee that we could contribute to this. So we've got review existing affordable housing policy and report on how it has been used and what can change or not, and develop a housing policy, researching other communities, including accessible, diverse, I guess, housing to follow establishment of housing targets. Okay. So if we work together in the coming months to hopefully come up with a recommendation to Council of Housing targets, then I guess this would be a follow through. And again, it's like, I don't know how much we as a committee are doing, or if we're, again, doing a little bit of research and making recommendations. for next steps. Yeah, because I mean, I think it's beyond our scope and abilities to develop a housing policy, but it's more of a, what would we recommend and how does that, how do we recommend that to council or to be prioritized in the coming years? I'm not sure. So we have the affordable housing policy, which has been around for a long time. Has it been reviewed or updated or anything since it was implemented? Do you know, Daniel?
I don't believe it's been updated.
Okay. Yeah, so maybe that could be one of the first things, is just to simply look at it, see how it's, how it's been implemented, how it's been used, successes, failures, challenges, and if any, we could make comments or recommendations as to if it needs to be revised or updated. Does that sound like a reasonable thing to do under policy development? Yeah.
If I could just bring us back to the island plan, Robyn.
Yeah.
The island plan for last year identifies as our top priority to expand the affordable housing policy to a comprehensive housing policy. So even though it's noted here as a low priority, it actually was identified as the first point in our job for last year.
Okay.
So I think honestly, we actually need to give this higher priority than we were thinking. At the time.
Okay.
And part of it is the specific housing targets. So the work that Ron just has advanced is helpful in us revising this. And I think there are three things that we're looking at. We're looking at an expanded housing policy, a revision of the affordable housing policy, and that update of the affordable housing reserve policy.
Okay. Policy. Okay, so yeah, I'm okay with that. So maybe that's something that becomes, so maybe once, I don't know, Ron, is that work that interests you? Like maybe once we've set the housing targets, that could be the next step kind of for that subcommittee, or if others are interested, to kind of keep rolling with policy and review those three things that Maureen has talked about. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yes, but in truth, I don't know how much I can bring to the party on doing that. Okay.
Does it interest you? Like, do you want to
Sure.
learn more and research things? Yeah. So I mean, none of us are experts, or we all have different expertise that we're bringing. But I think just interest and research, and like so far from what I've read of the research you did already, it looks great. So you certainly don't have to be an expert to be able to do some of the work to contribute to the committee. So yeah.
I'd be happy to work on that.
Okay, great. So why don't we do that? So maybe we'll consider it like a policy committee or something, a subcommittee. And so once that work is done on, so after housing targets, recommendations complete, move to these policies.
Sorry,
Okay.
just for my notes, Maureen,
Yeah.
so the three things were the expanded housing policy, revision of the affordable housing policy, and update of
Housing reserve.
housing reserve. Thank you.
And question for Daniel. Daniel, would Natasha be working with us on this at all?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so.
Okay, just thinking of her experience in Vancouver.
Let's start, right? Something.
Okay. Okay, great. So it sounds like we have a plan for how to tackle these. So housing targets first, and then we'll move on to other policies. We're going to have a working session together on numbers 2, 4, and 5. The Housing Reserve Fund we're going to talk about in a minute, and affordable alternative modes of land tenure. We're going to invite some speakers and maybe do a bit of research to provide some background on that. And then later on in the year, we'll have a working session to address sort of 7 and 8. Is there anything else maybe in the speaker series that we want to start thinking about for this year? Like, do we want to, so obviously we'll have Daron, hopefully he can come back as a developer on Bowen and give us some feedback. Is there anybody else? Are there any other developers that we haven't spoken to that we'd like to, or do we want to start expanding to other things?
Well, I think we should have John Reed come and speak with us. He is
Yeah.
moving
Good idea.
forward with the Grafton project, and
Yeah.
presumably at some point this spring we'll be seeing the affordable home ownership agreements coming for review. Would that be right, Daniel? Or is
Yeah.
that in the works?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other
John
thing
Reed
that I
could,
might-
It's actually
the other
next
thing
on
I
the
might
list.
suggest is that we don't get we don't get any direct public feedback in these meetings. And I wonder if it may make sense to have an open session that is just specifically for community feedback.
Okay.
Just hold a place, an open place, have a topic or two, and call for participation. Do it in an evening, but just open things up a little.
Okay, yeah, I'm open to that. And that would be, in my mind, that might be sort of an engagement session. So outside of our typical meeting times, that sort of to have an engagement session. Yeah, I'd be for that. Okay, so maybe we can, oh, it's always hard to figure out a best time to when to do a public engagement session. Because yeah, like summer's terrible, right? So we want to avoid summer. So I don't know, does anybody have any suggestions? I'm thinking like March, April, May, sometime in there is probably, you know, because people are around, avoid spring break, but you know, generally people are around. I don't know, with COVID, I guess it's a little less of a worry, but I don't know, what do people think?
May.
May?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
All right.
Is
So
that, what would that just open, would there be any structure to that session?
yeah, I think we can
Develop-
think about that. Like if we sort of tentatively think it's going to be in May sometime, then we can talk about what that's going to look like and how we would, you know, maybe it's just some prompting questions and we, yeah, put it out there for people to attend or, yeah, I don't know, Maureen, did you have anything specific in mind?
I thought that we might encourage people to take a look at the interviews with developers.
Okay.
So, you know, give people an opportunity to say something about that.
Okay.
And I mean, I think that there may be interest in just sort of sharing some stories about how people are handling things.
Okay.
I mean, some years ago, we did a session on detached secondary suites. And we sort of covered, I mean, it was an information session and somebody who had done it. But that was several years ago now. I mean, there are lots of people who may be thinking about it again, or there may not be. I mean, it just kind of would be interesting to fix on some of that.
Okay, yeah, it's good. Yeah, I have to admit, with all of the COVID stuff the last couple of years, engagement sessions have been kind of off my radar because it's just, yeah. But I think this is a great idea. And maybe what it just occurred to me while we were chatting is that maybe if we should have by then for sure have our housing target recommendations. Maybe that's something that we can bring to that, because I think that would be interesting. Again, it doesn't have to be the only thing we're engaging about, but it could be one thing that we're engaging and that we could offer to people to say, hey, these are we allowed to do that, to say, hey, these are recommendations we're making, and then get feedback and then say we're going to recommend these to council? Or is that too, I don't know about the flow of information here, or before it's gone to council? Is that okay? Or maybe we just say, hey, we're working on housing targets. What is your feedback?
Yeah.
Maybe we don't have to present what we're doing already, but we could even present a little bit of background, some of the work Ron's doing, and maybe ask for general feedback. Does that sound appropriate? Yeah, Michael?
It certainly does. I would have to say, if I saw it on the council agenda, I would probably have to sort of ask Daniel, this is on the agenda. We're going to need your thoughts on this as well, specifically for council. So as long as we're not putting Daniel in a difficult position or getting this out of sync. But that would, I think, for most councillors, they would say, okay, great for the committee now, well, let's get Daniel's thoughts on this as well. So as long as you're good with that, then I'm fine too.
Okay, yeah, so I think because the idea, my hope with the housing targets is, Ron's done some research today, we'll talk about it as a group, maybe there's a bit more work to do, and we'll try to put together suggestions or recommendations that we would put forward to council. And then I think it pretty much always goes through Daniel anyways, doesn't it? That's my memory of how we've done other recommendations, is we as the committee send it to Daniel, and then Daniel edits or whatever, he does his own thing, and then it sort of, because it filters through him, then up to council to make those recommendations. So yeah, I think Daniel will have his stamp on it regardless before it goes to council. And then the idea for this engagement session would just be, again, we can speak more specifically about how it would be handled or what the question that we'd ask, but that would just be maybe one of the prompting questions would be like, what would you like to see in housing targets? Or what do you think is a priority for housing targets? Something along those lines, along with just general feedback on housing on the island, stories, those kinds of things. Yeah. Okay, I think that sounds great. So we'll aim for May for that one. Although maybe I'm actually thinking maybe earlier, because I think it'd be nice to get the feedback on the housing targets and then get that kind of off to Daniel and council, maybe sooner than that. Would anybody object to maybe a bit earlier? Yeah. Maybe April? Yeah. Okay. We'll aim for that. All right. Any other speakers that we can think of that we'd like to bring in, or that we think could be helpful on any of the other things that we're working on?
So John was the last in the list of developers.
Okay.
And then we had four, I'm just looking at the list we made.
Please.
We have 4 contractors identified.
Oh yeah, okay.
If we're still interested in that.
Yeah, so that might be worthwhile having 1 or 2 of them come and speak, whoever's interested, giving us their feedback. I think the goal of that was just to kind of, because they're like obviously boots on the ground, they're the ones building it. I think that was the idea, is to get some feedback from them about how various things are working, you know, zoning, bylaws, processes at the muni, those kind of things, getting their feedback on that. Okay, and then anything else? I'm just looking back at our list here, if there's anything that might be useful. I liked the suggestion, sorry, I think it came up before, but maybe we bring it in here again, is talk to another municipality. It's like we had the mayor from Tofino spoke. She spoke to council though, I think, not to us as a committee, but not that we need to necessarily get a mayor, but maybe somebody else on a housing committee, or somebody in the planning department that has done, you know, a housing policy recently or something like that, like just to speak to another municipality on their experiences. And I know, Maureen, yours was specifically about Community Lands Trust. So maybe we can try to find somebody who's either done CLT or maybe successfully completed an affordable housing project, like a small community that's done an affordable housing project recently. That might be completed affordable housing. Like I know, is it Gibson's? I feel like there's somebody on the Sunshine Coast who recently completed an affordable housing project. I think it was sort of a smaller one, like a 4-plex or a 6-plex or something like that. I seem to remember seeing an article about that. So yeah, maybe we can reach out to some of the smaller ones and just hear about their experience and how that came to fruition, and if they have any tips. Okay, great. Anything else on this before we sort of wrap up this item of our work plan?
There are a couple of small corrections from Allison in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Small correction to 5B. Okay. Oh, I see. Just some sort of typos and formatting. We don't really need to. Okay, great. So we'll just, before we finalize it, take that into account. Okay. Do we need to vote or anything? Is that finally a housing or plan, or no, we're good? Okay, we don't need a vote or anything. Okay, great. So hearing no objections, let's move along. Subcommittee reports. So Ron, you're up.
Okay, so thank you, Robyn.
Yeah.
I probably should have asked that my item be moved up in the agenda, because it sort of logically precedes some of the things we've just been talking about. Nevertheless, let me proceed. So my report is attached to the agenda materials at the very end there. At our December meeting, I said I would address part of our 2022 work plan, namely part of point number 1, reviewing the terms in which other communities set their housing targets. There's never any suggestion that I would come up with any actual numbers.
No,
Well,
no. Just the
Okay.
research. Yeah.
Good. Well, I looked at the housing plans of 9 other BC municipalities, and what I found was relevant is summarized in my report. None of those municipalities set specific quantitative targets for the numbers of different housing types to be started or finished by specific dates. And I think that's the kind of targets we were imagining. So I was kind of surprised to find that no other municipalities did that. There's probably a couple of reasons for that. One is that most of the municipalities seem to follow the template that the provincial government has set out in terms of what a housing report should be. And perhaps the other reason is that that municipalities really have very little ability to ensure that the specific targets they set will be realized. I mean, I like the idea of housing targets in terms of announcing what is important, setting some priorities, and enabling accountability. But on the other hand, if the municipality really can't ensure that those targets will be reached, then they're not really targets in a management by objectives kind of sense. They're really just kind of a wish list. So that being said, I think there's a couple different ways that the committee could go from here. We could abandon targets entirely. We could do what some other municipalities have done, and that is, rather than setting targets for numbers of affordable rental suites, for instance, to be built year by year, we could set targets for policy innovations to be enacted. Or if we are to stick with the original idea of setting quantitative targets, I think what we have to do is, on the one hand, we do have some good data from the Urbanic study about housing needs on Bowen. We've got that. And I think what we would have to do is balance that against the resources that are available to the BMI, cash, land, potential changes in zoning, and maybe access to provincial and federal government funding. And on the basis of that, come up with realistic, attainable targets, which would depend not only upon the resources that are available to the municipality, but also everybody else wants those resources. So there are political decisions to be made here as to how much of a commitment one could realistically ask ask council to make over some period of years. So I think that's kind of where we are in terms of making a decision as to what we want in the form of housing targets.
Yeah, Maureen, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. I really appreciate the report. I appreciate the research and the conclusions that you presented in it. And I do want to argue that we do need to have housing targets, and in part because when the municipality completes the housing reports to the province, I've just been checking on the requirements there, and those reports, which are, they've only been done once, so it's a new requirement from the province, and part of the required content is to specify the number of housing units, and they're asking for 5-year projections and indicate the number and type, you know, how many bachelors, how many 1-bedrooms, 2-bedrooms, and 3-bedrooms. So I think that even though historically people have not been doing that, as your report shows, that going forward we have to do that. And again, I'm going to ask Daniel to confirm that is the case. Is my reading of the required content accurate? Are you anticipating that information will be needed by the province?
Yeah, I mean, it is when you look through what the need for the housing needs report. I guess what it's more showing is like what some of it is historic, like what's the current housing situation. And then, yeah, you'd look at what's the anticipated population based on like BC Stats data for growth for the municipality.
I think we're stuck with targets.
Yeah, and I mean, to jump in, that's what I was sort of, it's good to hear that, Maureen, and Daniel had that confirmed that really it is worthwhile trying to nail down some numbers, to actually put some quantitative numbers to this. But Ron, I also appreciated your comments, like, thank you so much for this work. It's really great. My thinking is in addition to hard numbers, because I think, like you say, it's pretty easy and we've already got them from that report. We need X number of units or households by 2031 or whatever it is. We've already got those from that report. So maybe it's, putting that into, say, a 5-year and a 10-year or something like that. Somehow we present those numbers so we can kind of see what's coming in the future. And maybe it even gets projected further so we can all wrap our heads around, what's coming in the future. And then maybe as part of, in addition, then it starts to look at, I think, kind of how you've identified, Ron. I really appreciated your sort of questions to consider that we had. So if everybody's looking at page 12 on the PDF of our agenda, kind of discussions for us to have, it would be then talking about, out of the, X number of units, and I'm just going to pull a number because I think it was sort of like we needed 329 units for ownership and 127 for tenants or something like that. I'm just going to throw those numbers out there. So, we need roughly, it's a lot, 450 units in the next 10 years. Then we can maybe talk about or recommend what are the targets, like what are the suggestions for those, like how much should be rental and how much should be ownership that we think would serve the community and the people that are here, how much should be market, low end of market, affordable, subsidized, those kinds of things. And maybe that's where we can contribute, because I think we can get those hard numbers from other places and, like, say, population projections and those kinds of things. I think that quantitative stuff's around. We don't have to sort of make that up, but maybe it's the prioritizing and like what kind of units, like say we have 450 units that need to be built, but what are those units? Where are they? Are they attached? Are they detached? Yeah, and like say, we kind of had those numbers. I feel like it was almost a year ago now. Daniel sort of gave us that information about here's all the lots that are already here and already subdivided, and somebody could just put a building permit in tomorrow to build a house. Like they're out there. So we could project how many, single family homes based on historic building permits and stuff are likely to be built in the next 10 years. And then what's the gap? So between kind of what's typically been happening, and again, those single family homes that are likely just to kind of happen regardless of what we do, then what's the gap between what's been like the identified need and what we kind of anticipate is going to be built, and then what do we want those to be, and then how, because I feel like that's the only thing that the municipality can actually help with is, like say, kind of proactive rezoning, putting out expressions of interest, those kinds of things. But they need to know what they're asking for, right? Are they asking for rental or ownership or low market or whatever it is, or being more proactive about going after government funds or whatever that takes. So it feels like a lot. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of talking off the cuff. It's my thoughts aren't at all kind of organized on this, but that's just kind of like what's coming to my head after listening to Ron and Maureen. Does anybody else have additional thoughts? And if not, we can kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I thought maybe because, it's so easy to say there's apartments and there's townhouses and whatever, but to provide some clarity what each unit type actually has to offer. And let me give you an example. Some forms of housing are more specifically tailored to one user, and other forms of housing are far more flexible. Let me give you an example. If you have a 3-bedroom apartment that is accessed by elevator, that can be used by all kinds of people that have all kinds of different needs. If you have a townhouse, that is more restricted, right? Because there's a stair in it and whatever. But what I'm trying to say is that it's almost like a little matrix, like what works for what type of person, to give a bit more clarity. I also find that if there is all this demand, and obviously we also have to make sure that there's a consciousness of what that implies, like how much change in zoning or in is required to actually achieve that. Because the like for instance, like because Bowen simply has the reason why there's so many single family homes that people are building them is simply because there's single family lots available, right? But the moment you change the zoning on that, and you know, I find that, you know, this is the example that Vancouver gives, I think is really interesting. They say, for well, you can build the same amount of volume, same amount of space. There's nothing going to change in the massing of these places, but you can just use it differently. Like, you know, I think I've mentioned once before that we're doing now one house on, what is it, 45th and Mackenzie, that is right in a sensitive Dunbar area, but it has 2 strata-titled units, and each with a secondary suite. So that is 4 families in a precious single family area in the Dunbar, in the Dunbar neighborhood. But what I also find interesting is that there is flexibility in how you do that, because if you say you can do a duplex, people have all these ideas what that means. And for instance, a lot of bylaws will say, are they side by side, or are they front to back, or are they, you know, one above the other? But the flexibility that in this particular project, like just as an example, it's a family, and one family with kids, like the couple with the kids, they took 50% of the floor space. The daughter, the sister, took 25% of the space, and then there's 2 secondary suites that are 1/8 of the space each. So it is 5,600 divided in what is that? 5,600 in 2,800, 1,400, 700, and 700. And the amount of flexibility that it gives is just amazing. But I don't think people really realize that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
and then
also,
probably from the outside, it looks like a very large single family home. So I'm guessing, so it sort of fits into the neighborhood, right?
It doesn't look like a really large family home. It looks like a family home that is the same size as people build for a single family home. Because in those areas, most people maximize the square footage. You know, and then it's more the question, like, why do people want to build these forms of housing? But I find that and what's also so smart about it, in that area, Vancouver doesn't allow coach homes. And the reason is, I find it really clever, is that it actually protects the forest, the park-like landscaped character of the neighborhood. And what they also do is they restrict parking. You actually have a maximum number of stalls. Like, we could only have 2 stalls there. You say, well, how can that work with four units? Well, you look at the streets there, and there's hardly any parking on it because everybody has a garage. Now you go to other spaces to the West End, and you have to drive around for 2 hours to find a parking spot. So the city says, okay, let people park on the street. But I find it interesting how it's a huge, and if these projects go in and nobody complains and people see the benefit, and so I kind of think that to make people aware what these things actually have to offer and what the potential is, I find it interesting. You know, for instance, when I say it's almost like a matrix, right? You can actually you say, okay, here's a single family house with a secondary suite, whatever. You go all the way down the line. Here's a duplex, here's a townhouse, and then you have the different family situations at the top, and here's your matrix, and you can figure out which one actually is the most flexible in its use. You know what I mean? So for example, it's obvious that the 2-bedroom suite or so in an apartment building has already a number of advantages that some other forms of housing don't, you know? So
yeah. I think, yeah, thanks, Fritz. I think that, and we've been talking about those things for a while, and I think that comes up as well, and it'll come up in our working session when we look at those cluster zonings and those kinds of things, making some recommendations for those.
Yeah, and happy to, and what I think is really key is not try to control everything too much and give flexibility, because flexibility makes people respond because they can do what they want to commit to.
Yeah, and I think a good example on Bowen is the, I don't know what we called it, a pilot project or spot zoning at the top of Kate's Hill, when Wolfgang and Daron developed the essentially duplexes. So they were, you know, single family homes. They met all of the requirements for a single family home with a suite, but they were able to stratify them. And so they sold them as 2 separate units. So that, we already have one example of a small example of that having happened. So yeah, I think that's good. Anybody else? We've heard from Maureen and myself and Fritz. Anybody else have comments or thoughts on Ron's, Michael or Daniel have comments on Ron's research? Oh, Michael, I think you're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise here. Yeah, no, thanks to Ron for that. And no, I think we've spoken to it generally.
Okay, great. Daniel?
Well, I think it's great. And I was just looking at this idea of targets in relation to the housing needs reports to file and sort of population projections. And when we saw it with the report that was done, is that the problem with projections is they typically look at, they look at what's happened in the past and they project to the future. And any report we did now would do the same thing. It would say, well, what's happened over the last 10 years, the last 5 years? And then it draws a line and says, okay, that goes into the future. And so maybe part of the goal of setting housing targets is saying, well, how is that not meeting current, current needs, and what would the difference be? Like, so I see it sometimes discussed in housing policy, the idea of, it says, well, we need this many units. It assumes that right now you've got the perfect number of units. And then it's like, what do you need in the future? Versus if you go, well, right now in Bowen, we don't have enough of something, or whatever the answer may be, then maybe that changes how you do your targets. You say, well, if we want, to continue as we are now, over 5 years, we would need this many units. But if the goal is, provide more rental housing than we've seen delivered in the past, well, that's like a projection isn't going to help necessarily. It's going to say, well, based on historic numbers, this is what you would need to sort of maintain the same situation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, what I'm hearing from you is that if we go based on kind of what has been built, single family houses, very limited rental, and project that forward, that's not what we want to be doing. But we want to be looking at, I think it's really valid to look at what the current gap is, like where are those, what are the needs right now? And yeah, and I think that kind of says it in a different way what I was thinking. I think we're on the same page, is like finding out what do we need in that 5 or 10 years, and then what should those be? And I agreed, like add to that the current deficit. Like right now we're in need of X number of housing units, and then in 5 years, 10 years, we're going to need this many more. And what kind of units should those be that, like you say, haven't necessarily been addressed in the past? Yeah, not just to kind of keep on that same trajectory. Is that?
The other thing is that our current housing needs assessments based on 2016 census data.
Right.
And the census data is going to start rolling out in February with population estimates.
Right.
And that's going to have to be taken into account. The housing needs report I thought was interesting in many respects, but I also had a feeling that it was disconnected to 2020. And I think it's going to be even more disconnected to 2021. So we're working with a community that's gone through an awful lot of change. Is my expectation what the data will show.
Yeah, I agree. I think that'll be really useful to see what comes out in the coming months. And I forget, Maureen, the population data comes out first. From memory, the housing and stuff comes out later, kind of in the year, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Somewhere. I think it's May or June. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it might be able to help us then. Okay, great. Any other thoughts? I feel like that's good feedback. Ron, do you feel like we have like we can move forward, like as a subcommittee, maybe we can arrange a subcommittee meeting and take all of this feedback and figure out a way to move forward. Oh, you're muted, Ron.
So I just exchanged a bit of chat with Daniel. And so what I could do then, if the committee thinks it's appropriate, is take a closer look at the housing needs laid out in the Urbanics report, and then talk to Daniel about the real world of what we could actually hope to do, what would be within the realistic limits of the resources available to BMI, and then I could just take a shot at putting down some numbers for what I take to be the most urgent priorities and bounce them off this committee.
Yeah, okay. And then why don't we and I can't remember who was on the subcommittee. It was Ron and I. Was Maureen, were you on? No, I can't remember who else it was. Yeah, so if you want, we can maybe have a subcommittee meeting, just a smaller one with a few of us to talk about those. And, sometimes it's nice to just bounce those ideas around. And then that can come back to this committee. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, thanks, Ron. Excellent. Yeah, Maureen. Yeah,
I tracked down the rollout information. Housing is not going to be available until September.
Okay.
So that's quite late. But the population and demographic information is February and then more in April.
Okay. Okay, good. So we'll at least have something in the next couple of months. Okay, great. So I think we've got next steps for that. And so Ron and I, and I thought there was somebody else. I don't know, Steph, if you have it there, who's on our subcommittee. We'll meet. Maybe it was just the two of us. Okay. Powerful subcommittee. We can get a lot done with two people. We can be very decisive.
Nimble.
Yeah, exactly. Nimble.
Robyn, sorry,
okay.
if I hop in, did we skip the reserve? Did I miss the reason for skipping the reserve?
No, it might have just been me. Did I skip over it by accident? Okay. Oh, where are we? Oh, I did. Yeah. Okay. Nope, that was just me. Good. Okay. Well, let's wrap this up then. So we'll keep going on that. Thanks, Ron, for all your work. That looks great, and for your continuing work. So we'll be in touch. So yeah, let's go back. Sorry, to the Housing Reserve Fund bylaw. Apologies that we missed. I skipped that. So number 7. Okay.
I'm just looking. I don't have a population for subcommittee. Sorry.
No. Okay. No, that's all right. It must have just been Ron and I.
You and Ron for now.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, let me just see. I wasn't sure why. I don't know why my name was on this one. I can't remember. Maybe just because I'm the chair.
Just because you're the chair. If I don't have a name, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. So this is maybe Steph or Daniel. Can you fill me in? Like where did this come from? Was like who prompted this, or who crafted this bylaw? Is this the existing one and we're just going to look at it, or is this this is revisions?
This is the current bylaw.
Oh, okay. This is the current bylaw. Okay. Okay. So sorry, everybody.
From the last meeting minutes, I have discussed amendments to the Housing Reserve Fund policy.
Okay.
And I realized it was not a policy, it was a bylaw.
Okay.
That's.
I think there were 2 things that we had talked about, and one was prompted by an email from Councillor Morse, and she said that she felt that it would be important that if I got this right, Daniel, is this in the reserve fund or is this in the affordable housing policy? But her point was that in the LCP, where the housing policy was being discussed, that there was a point made that wasn't being highlighted enough in either the policy or in the reserve fund, which was the second bulleted point in the policy, which is to make an equivalent financial contribution to the municipality to be directed to a housing reserve fund or housing trust fund. So what was happening was that developers were allocating the 15% space, whereas they could potentially have that option of contributing money instead. That makes sense?
So that was, sorry, that was Councillor Morris's comment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
she-
I guess, yeah, so she was wondering, because it's not clearly laid out. Is that what you're getting at? It's not really like clearly laid out anywhere that that's an option, because I think there is, to compare it to the parking one. Can't remember if that's an option. Like if you don't have the space to, in the cove or whatever, if you don't have the space to put parking, you can contribute to the parking reserve fund or something. Is that established? Yeah. So maybe it's kind of saying, hey, can we do the equivalent for this housing thing? And actually, I don't know if there's specific numbers. I don't know, Daniel, if you have that off the top of your head. Like, I'm not sure. Are there specific numbers? Like a cost, like if you can't build a parking space, you need to put X number of dollars into the parking fund. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, that's laid out in our land use bylaw in the code.
Okay. Okay. But there is
Yeah,
a specific number, like one parking space equals this many dollars. Like it's,
yeah, I think it's 20,000.
quantified. Okay. So then is that the idea that maybe we, because again, I don't quite know the answer to this, we quantify it. So if you can't meet your affordable housing commitment, you need to contribute X number of dollars, some percentage, like whatever, like putting hard numbers to it so that it's a sort of clear and transparent? Or is that, do you think, Maureen?
I mean, Allison's point, like specifically for the housing policy, is just that I think right now the policy doesn't include that reference at all. Like the OCP says 15% or you provide equivalent financial contribution.
Okay.
But our housing policy doesn't say that, like doesn't list it as clearly. It would be nice if they sort of meshed and made it clear that was an option too for people.
Okay, so it's actually quite simple. We really just need to make a recommendation that, and I don't know how we sort out if it's in this housing reserve fund policy or is it in the affordable housing policy. Somewhere between those two documents, it sounds like we just need to make a recommendation that they add a clause that, and I'm sure we can get language from the parking one, that they add a clause that says a developer may choose to, contribute 15% of floor space or to the housing reserve fund, and this is what they would be expected to contribute or whatever it is. It's pretty straightforward. Am I getting that?
Yeah, although I think probably it's like with the reserve fund, or not the reserve fund, sorry, with the policy, it's like it's worth looking at the whole thing and saying, okay, that changed to match the OCP, but
okay,
if we're going to do that, we may as well look at the whole thing.
Okay, and is it the housing reserve fund or the affordable policy bylaw or the affordable housing policy or both that we need to?
Yeah, it's definitely the affordable housing policy.
Okay.
So where am I finding that, Daniel, on
Oh, I'll send the link in the chat.
I think we've been running into some issues about the policies and bylaws on our website. I can.
Okay, well, that worked. Thanks, Daniel. That link worked. Okay, so this is the affordable housing policy. Right. So, okay, now how urgent is this? Can this be, because we'd actually already have in our work plan to work on policies and looking and reviewing this one. Is it something that we can include in that in the coming months, or is this something that we feel should be addressed more urgently?
I think it can fit in that timeline.
Okay.
Like the policy has existed since 2008 and the OCP since 2011.
Right.
Okay. I would argue against coming up with a specific contribution laid out in the bylaw. I think a parking space is a whole lot simpler than a development project.
Yeah.
And I'd like there to be room for discussion of what the equivalent financial contribution should be rather than specifying a contribution. I think you need to leave that leeway there.
Okay.
Now, that's my thoughts. I don't know about the rest of you.
I have of two minds. I like the idea of leaving it flexible because I think we want to allow flexibility and creativity and all of those kinds of things. Like maybe it's a mix. Maybe they do 8% and they contribute some amount to the fund, like whatever it is. I think it's nice to be able to have that flexibility. Or yeah, maybe they contribute something different. Like, I don't know, maybe they slice off a bit of their land and give that over for housing or something. Like, it's nice that there would be some room to negotiate. So I agree with that. And then the other part of me is wondering if then, because then that's, again, just thinking back to the feedback we've had from developers, that's uncertainty from them, right? So the way, but whereas if you're doing a development in the Cove and you know a parking space, you have to contribute whatever it was, $20,000, you can do the math and you can figure out, is it worth me building this or is it worth me contributing to the fund? And it's very clear and transparent ahead of time so they can do it. Again, I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm kind of in both minds, but maybe it's like, maybe there's 3 options. Maybe it's you can build it, you can pay this fixed amount, or you can negotiate. Like, I don't know. It's just, I'm just throwing ideas out there. I don't know that any of those are the answers specifically, but I can see both points, that it's nice to be nimble and flexible and negotiate. But I think that if it's possible, and I don't even know, because I wouldn't even know where to start, if it's possible to add a quantity like $20,000 per parking space, if there is some number like that, I feel like then that, again, that gives those developers that clarity and certainty ahead of time as they're crunching their numbers. Is it worth me building this, or is it worth just giving to the fund? Or do I want to then enter into a negotiation and find something more creative? But yeah, I think those are up for discussion. Like, that should be part of our discussion when we look at it. Yeah.
Robyn,
any other? Yeah.
I have to say at this stage, I think this could be a very exhaustive conversation. And quite honestly, right now, I think the timing is bad for that conversation.
Okay.
Not that it shouldn't take place. Obviously, it probably should. But, you know, right now, we managed to get through the last one on its merits. It maybe not the best way to go. But as I said, this conversation could be very long and exhaustive, and I'm wishing to steer away from that right now.
And now, is there a reason, Michael? Is that because I know a couple of times you've sort of said, look, because it's an election year, we should leave that for the next council. Like, it's a little bit much for us to take on or make a decision, and it should be the newly elected people. Or is there a different reason?
A little bit like that. The more focused the current council is on getting the existing stuff done. And tying up, where I say tying up loose ends, just getting things done, finalized and finished. And then other worthy projects then can be at the discretion of the new council. If it's felt that we can tie up all those loose ends and still have this conversation, if the majority of council feel that fair enough. My own inclination is to make life as simple, straightforward and as focused as possible in the remaining months of the council, and to do less better and not get involved in more extraneous projects. That's just one council opinion.
Yeah. No, I think that's fair enough. So I think we as a committee should keep working on it, because I'm just going to guess that by the time we finish our housing targets, which is going to be a little bit of, I'm just going to guess a couple months before we actually have a finished recommendation to go up and move on to this other policy. Like, I think it's going to be a while. I'm just guessing that the pace of our meetings and what we can achieve in between. I would think it would be towards the end of the year that we might have an actual, here's some, solid recommendations. I would be very surprised if we actually could, it would take us a Herculean effort by a few of us to get something in front of council, I think, before the elections. And I don't know about everybody else. I just feel like that's I'm okay with that, setting it as a goal, maybe towards the end of the year, to have some really concrete suggestions and taking it to the new council. I don't have any problems with that.
I would still argue against that, which is that this could be tackled in two stages. The first stage is essentially a housekeeping point that is making clear in the existing policies that developers do have that option of making an equivalent financial contribution. And it's simply making the policies reflect something that is in the OCP and has been accepted. And I don't think that takes a significant amount of work. If we want to broaden the discussion and get into all sorts of details about, well, exactly how would that work and so on, that is a larger discussion. But doing the housekeeping aspect of it, I don't think is that challenging.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. Yeah, Okay, so how do we tackle this? Like Daniel, is this something that what can we as a committee do to help staff to achieve this? Do you want us to look for language, or do we just simply make a recommendation that we feel staff should add a clause to the affordable housing policy that, you know, allows for an alternate contribution from, you know, gross floor area or a contribution to housing reserve fund? Is it that straightforward?
I think so. To do that first step, like if the goal is just to put in a clause to match the OCP,
yeah,
then yeah, it could just be a motion that the committee recommend council direct staff to amend the affordable housing policy to, I guess, to reflect the, like, I think of language.
Yeah.
To reflect the requirements laid out in the policy 359 of the OCP.
Yeah.
For the equivalent financial contribution.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because that, like, thanks Maureen for clarifying. I think that makes a lot of sense. This really is, you know, well, we could discuss a housekeeping item. So it's something that it's a simple clause. It should just be added in. It's something that we want in practice. It's in the OCP. We're just bringing it in alignment. And then that bigger discussion of, you know, do we quantify it? All of those kinds of things can be tackled later and make a bigger recommendation. So what do we think? Steph, did you capture any of what Daniel just said?
That the committee recommend the council direct staff to amend the affordable housing policy to reflect requirements of in the OCP regarding financial contribution. Help.
I think something.
Are you able to put it up on the screen, Steph? Sometimes I find it's easier if we can visually look at the language. Oh, there you go, Daniel's.
Daniel's doing my job.
Could we mention the policy, the OCP policy number?
I think if you look in the chat, Daniel's written something. Yeah. That the HAC recommend, so I'm just going to read out what Daniel's written. That the HAC recommend council direct staff to prepare amendments to the affordable housing policy to include a provision for, and in quotes, an equivalent financial contribution as specified in policy number 359 in the official community plan. Do we have to say financial contribution to the housing reserve fund, or is it better to leave that specific element out?
And that's what the policy says. So make it
in the OCP.
Yeah. To be directed to a housing reserve fund or housing trust fund.
Okay, so could we add that into this? So an equivalent financial contribution to, you know, a housing reserve fund or housing trust fund.
Housing reserve fund.
Or it's just a language from the OCP, right? You're saying it's just being quoted directly from the OCP. Yeah. Okay. So committee, any other comments on the language of this or this recommendation? No. Okay. So, sorry?
I'll move it.
Okay, thank you, Maureen. I'll second it. All in favor of this recommendation? Yeah, looks great. Carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. It's always nice. It feels so satisfying to actually make a recommendation and vote and get something done at a meeting. It's wonderful. Okay, so and I think that's great. That discussion has brought up some items that, again, in a few months when we're actually tackling policy review, we can kind of bring those items back up for discussion. So I think that's great. Okay, did I miss anything else in the step? Did I skip over anything else? Delegations, elections, business arising, new business, subcommittee reports, and that was just some information items. Okay, great. I think we can finish up then. If there's no other comments or thoughts, thanks everybody for your time today. Thanks, Ron, especially for all your work. And yeah, nice to see everybody. And we'll see. Oh, do we have a date set for the next meeting? Are we on a regular schedule? I can't. Yeah, let's do that.
So today is Monday.
It's sort of like the third Monday. I don't know if that's something we want to try to continue, or actually next month that doesn't work. Oh, is that the holiday?
Yeah.
Next month? Yeah. Okay. Do we want to do the 14th? Is that of February, or the 28th? Because I think the Monday mornings were better.
14th and 28th are both council days then.
Oh, okay. Was that, yeah. So Maureen, Michael, was that better or worse?
For Michael.
Well, for me, if we're going to have meetings, to group them on one day within reason makes more sense than spreading them all over the week.
Yeah.
I can't do the 14th. Could
Okay.
do the 28th.
Okay, so does the 28th at the same time, 9:30 work for everybody?
Yeah.
In general? Yeah, Fritz, are you checking? That
Okay.
that works. Yeah. Okay. All right, great. So see you February 28th, 9:30 a.m. Okay. Thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.